Hi, my name is Kate Clyde. I am the Senior Director of Exhibits and Experience Design here at the Museum of Us. The way that this exhibit came together was many years in the making. The initial concept for this really came about, I would say, maybe almost 8 years ago when we were doing community consultations with groups of people around education for the race exhibit that we had from the Science Museum of Minnesota. And so that exhibit, called Race Are We So Different, really served as the foundation for the discussions that came for this exhibit to be realized in this space. And so while that exhibit was really an important moment for us, that really allowed us to see how these conversations are very values aligned for us, that's very mission driven for us. But feedback that we received was that while that exhibit is amazing, it's also rooted in the American South, which is very grounded in Black-white narratives around discussions around race. This region is very different. And so that is the feedback that we really heard and wanted to respond to. And so we started taking more of a regional approach to the way that we were thinking about those conversations. And really it's a multinational approach. And so we are rooted here in San Diego, which is on the United States side, but also we're in a single metropolitan region with Tijuana, which is in Mexico as well. And when we really think about this as a transnational space with so many people encompassing this region who really have lives on both sides of the border, that is a story that was really coming forward as one that needed to be told. And then if we expand that further, both San Diego and Tijuana are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Kumeyaay Nation. And so when we say trinational or multinational, that's really what we're thinking of is the indigenous people who are here since time immemorial. We're thinking about the United States and Mexico, and also the border that crossed Kumeyaay land to begin with. And the way that we really started with beginning to even put that conversation together is we formed a race advisory council. And so for an entire year, we invited people who were doing anti-racism work in their own communities, community leaders from around the region, to really come and meet. And so we got together and we talked for a couple hours every month for a year and really held a lot of space for just having those conversations of what needs to show up in an exhibit about race that is more representative of this region. And that is how we created the exhibit you see before you. We really opened the exhibit with the idea that race is not biology. Race is a social construct that has been really a political construct that has really been created that informs policy, but is truly not rooted in science. And so we worked with an indigenous Hawaiian geneticist, Dr. Kealu Fox, who is based as a professor here at UCSD. And he helped create this video and really informed the broader exhibit on many levels as well. He really brings the research and academic rigor to that conversation and really helped us create this piece that explains that we are really more interconnected than a lot of, those maps that you see coming out of Africa with the arrows. Those are not quite right. That is an oversimplified story, and people have been migrating back and forth across the world since the beginning of time. And at the end of the day, we are far more integrated than one would be led to think.
I am Einar de la Torre.
I am Jamex de la Torre.
And I don't know if it was maybe a couple of years ago, Linda Farnadas invited us to, explore the possibility of making work having to do with this exhibition at its seminal moment. So there was a lot of stuff that still needed to be figured out. But we were, of course, intrigued because it is such a difficult, taboo subject, and at the same time obvious, because what's wrong is wrong and what's right is right. And how do you even begin to have a dialogue about something that most of us could agree on, but there's obviously a lot of people who don't.
So 2 years ago, we did an exhibition at the McNay Museum in San Antonio, Texas. And there we explored the idea of making a piece about castas. These castas are the colonial period paintings that show racial mixes, up to 20 different mixes, and usually starting with the white down to a darker mix, and all getting pretty derogatory as you get darker. It's pretty awful stuff. But in the context of the time, they were basically not edicts for laws, but pretty much curious Europeans, very curious about the new racial mixes that were happening in the Americas.
It was more about economic caste originally, but of course, anytime that you deal with race politics, you cannot separate socioeconomic from racial, from all kinds of other biases. To us, being invited and using the casta paintings was an obvious, perhaps, but a great tool, because it was a weird kind of futurism to see what these painters that were commissioned by the crown had to create what mixes of different people would look like without ever even seeing them. So there's something kind of funny and quirky about it, because the artist had a kind of untenable. But artists have always sort of been hired by whoever has the money to pay them to paint. So they had to paint these sort of futuristic. What would it look like? And it's an interesting, another way to look at them is to see how they perceive from their limited knowledge what people would potentially look like, and how they were also perceived to be good at certain things. Like this mix might be good at horses, or this mix might be good at working in the fields. And of course, it's awful also in terms of its racist connotations.
So the fundamental idea with the piece is that, we might look different, but we're all children of the nopal. We're all nopaleros. As a Mexican American living on the border, I think most people with similar heritage understands when we say that we all come from the same nopal. And when people do their genome, the biggest thing that people understand is how messy everything is. And the whole idea of racial purity was this construct that has done a lot of damage that never really existed.
So it's interesting to see the difference of how the perception of identity is seen in different places. For instance, in Mexico, by not having grown up fully in Mexico, only partly, we're not part of the Mexican system in terms of arts. So we're seen as border or outsiders. We've assimilated that, and that's fine. That's what it is. What it is. But when we show in Europe, we have a show that's touring in Europe. Right now, it's in Portugal. We're seen as very Mexican. Our work and our themes, our color, it's very, very Mexican to them. And yet, in Mexico, we are perhaps maybe seen as too vernacular and not representing Mexico in terms of what they perceive is their place in terms of contemporary art. How we're perceived as to where we're from, that's not our problem. Somebody else has to come up with their own conclusions. I cannot say I'm more from here than you, or those issues of percentages are kind of boring to me.
The lenticular process for us starts with a Photoshop document. And when you do a Photoshop document, you make it in layers, and usually you flatten it. But in our case, we leave it in layers, and we send it to the producer, who does the translation of the document into a lenticular document. And the lenticular print relies on a lenticular lens, which is the front, which is these ridges. And if you think of them as prisms, long prisms that go up and down, you will understand how it's an optical illusion.
That it is extremely important to continue to have this dialogue, because the only way we're going to be a nation and be a cohesive group is to see each other and talk to each other and have dialogue about these things, even if we differ in our conclusions. But right now we're in a pendulum that has everybody on their sides, and we do not have dialogue. How can an exhibition like this not be a wonderful thing in terms of getting the dialogue back on track and having people who actually don't agree to talk?
So, my name is Stanley Rodriguez, and I'm from the Ipai Nation of San Isabel, one of the 18 federally recognized reservations here in San Diego County. So what we have here is a traditional Kumeyaay boat. It's called Harhuayo. And Harhuayo, these boats have been used by our people for thousands of years. When the Spaniards first came, they reported seeing crazy Indians on grass boats hunting whales. We were never crazy. We just had this technology. Our people would take these boats to the Coronado Islands, which are 10 miles out. We would use these to fish. We would use them to hunt. We would use them to trade. The technology to make it almost went dormant. There was one lady, though, in Baja, she's from San Jose de la Zora. She taught me how to make these boats. Her family was the last family that would go to La Misión to go harvest salt, shellfish, crabs, lobsters, fishing, and they would use these boats. So she showed me how to do this. She was taught by her grandparents and her great-grandparents. She said she did not want this to die. We have a saying, knowledge without sharing is not really knowledge. So when we built this boat, we invited people from the communities, not just Kumeyaay, but anybody who wanted to learn. We made it over here. We put the boat together. So this is a representation of cultural practice that had almost gone dormant, and now it's a fire.
All right, so in this section, we're really talking about land use, and kind of like I was talking before about really, holding space for those, for people of this region who are really working in transnational spaces. The sculpture behind me is by artist Marcos Ramirez Ere, and so he created a piece specifically for this exhibit that references the border wall. And if you look inside the piece, you will see that it's constructed of hand tools that are used by people who cross the border every day to do labor in the United States. And so he really created this wonderful piece as this, provocative kind of moment to really, push us to question who is doing the labor when we think about people who are working in this space and working in this region. It's such an important piece, and I'm just so thrilled that he was able to create it for this exhibit.